Hello. Welcome once again to another live lesson here at Playground Sessions. I'm Phil, and for those who don't know, I'll be your teacher for the day. I'm joining the roster of app teachers now more with the 30-day challenge, which I want to talk about more too. But I'm Phil, and I've got my team here with me today. Say hey to Aiden, everyone. And give a hand as well to Andrew. He'll be here moderating. And we're going to have some fun today. This is the third installment of our theory lessons for the month. Okay, we did kind of a broad overview, and then we got into melody on our first week this month, and we talked about the theory that is related to that world, single note stuff, melody stuff, scales, things like that. And then we talked about harmony, which is when we add more than one note together at the same time, which of course means chords and more. Today, I'm excited to be talking about rhythm. So that's kind of the movement of music. We talked about, excuse me, whether we're playing a single note or more than one note at a time. That can all be done kind of in the abstract, a single note. But when we talk about rhythm, we're talking now about playing over time and how we manipulate either a single pitch or a grouping of pitches or harmony over time. Okay, and so we can talk about patterns. And we can talk about momentum, we can talk about energy, things like that. That's typically are words that we use to describe the rhythm in music. And so today, keeping it in the excuse me, in the 101 territory, we're going to be talking about note durations and the relationships between notes. And then we're going to shift gears and talk about time signatures, some common ones and some more uncommon ones. And we're going to talk a little bit about subdivision, and we're going to have some opportunities for some pop quiz stuff as well. So we're going to have fun today, and I'm glad you are all here for the hang. And so in the spirit of checking in with you guys, let's go to the chat. I saw some people commenting, and I actually, before the lesson started, I saw one that I wanted to address. But I just want to say, hey, so hey guys, hey Chad Miller, how you doing? Excuse me, guys. This is the live territory we're in here. And so I may need to grab some water in a minute, but for now I'm good. But hey Chad, good to see you. Mark, how are you? Woodsy Chris, hey, you're on time this time. So are we. It's good news. In the past, it was harder sometimes with some tech difficulties, but here we all are. Cynthia, hi. Hi Philip. Hi Cynthia. Nice to see you. Peter says, woohoo, first time here. I'm excited too. Stu, hey Stu, just watching, all right. Okay, here's the question. So Peter asks one question: how to deal with the rhythm changes in the 30-day challenge. Counting helps, but having the muscle memory of the faster rhythm throws me off when we need to go slow again. Interesting. So I guess I'll speak just broadly about this, Peter. In the 30-day challenge, as you've seen, because it's day 8 now, we've had a few days already, we tend to have a goal for the end of the day, and that is going to be a complete excerpt, you can call it, from the final arrangement, which we'll be doing on day 30. But there are several segments within the day that lead up to the final segment. And within those build-up segments, sometimes we may change the tempo to a slower tempo, or sometimes we may extract some of the notes or omit some of the notes from a part if we're working on something else, like timing or like adding both hands together, for example. But then by the end of the day, once through the breakdown segments, ideally, we're landing back at that final segment, and by the end of the day, you can be playing that final segment, that excerpt. And so your question is about the tempo, and that being one of the challenges that we either add or take away, right? So if you're working on something, I think it's all been in about 60 BPM so far in the 30-day challenge. Remember, first of all, in the app, there is also a slow tempo button that you can push. I don't remember what BPM that is set to right now, the slow tempo, but rest assured it's going to be slower than 60. And so for those who need help speeding up, take advantage of those tools and take advantage of the slower tempo, the time that it gives you to get through the learning segments. Now, for those of you who are struggling with slowing down, like you're saying, Peter, it might seem like an obvious statement to say that the faster you go, the harder it is, and the slower you go, the easier it is. But that is not necessarily the case. If you've got something in muscle memory, you really nailed it on the head there, that means you don't have to think about it. Your hand just does what it's practiced in the past. And if you've practiced it enough at a certain speed, your hands will be used to doing it at that speed. So yes, if you drastically slow the tempo down and you just jump right in, it may be difficult for your hands. And so just like just like going faster, you want to ease in to your fast tempo. You don't want to go from 60 to 160. You want to go gradually and incrementally, okay? I wouldn't go more than like 30 beats per minute in a jump, but I would even suggest starting way smaller than that. If you're playing with the metronome slider in the app or just any metronome, you can gradually speed up the tempo or speed down the tempo. So that's what I'd suggest to you, Peter. If that's the specific challenge that you're having, maybe going to the slow tempo for a following segment, you could ease your way down to that slow tempo with a few extra practice segments, a few extra practice records. Hit play a few more times on the segment before that or on that segment, but change the tempo so it's actually faster for you. And then as you go, slow it down gradually, because you have to reteach your hand this new muscle memory. It's an interesting point, and it's a good point to bring up, because it's not always the case that speeding up is the thing that is more difficult. But this just brings me to a larger point about the 30-day challenge, which is that we've taken some creative liberties here in our new attempt of how to break down this song for you guys over 30 days. For those who have been around for a while, you know how we've done songs in the past. We'll release songs and we'll break them down one hand at a time, and maybe we'll simplify them. But we don't really break down from the beginning to the end of each segment how to get through it, right? And so we've heard some feedback. This is part of a larger conversation we've been having internally at Playground Sessions. We've been hearing feedback that even our easy stuff that's labeled easy sometimes can be hard for our early true rookies. So this 30-day challenge has been an attempt for us to deliver something to the true rookies to get these guys playing every day and to get them over that 30-day hump. In order to do that, we've taken some creative liberties, including slowing and speeding up tempos where we think it might be more difficult, including changing a part temporarily so that it's easier to put the hands together, for example, or whatever that challenge is in that moment. And then we've opted to bring it back in towards the end. So I'll ask that you guys trust the process here with us and see it to the end of day 30 and see how we liked this rollout, how we liked this approach. We are always open to feedback here at Playground, and so with that in mind, I want to get back into the chat and see if we've got one more question here before we dig into our lesson on rhythm, okay? Thanks for hanging and writing in, everyone. Tina says, hello from chilly Northern Illinois. Hey, Tina. I spent a little time in Chicago. I spent 3 or 4 years there in my 20s, and I loved it. Where are you in Northern Illinois? I was also in Evanston a bit. It's a good spot, and it was definitely chilly. I remember that. Chad last time, I think last week, was talking about a new keyboard that he wanted to get, and Chad says, new keyboard's on the way and arriving Friday afternoon. Excited to be replacing my 36-year-old sampler. Chad, you gotta post a picture or a video when the keyboard comes of yourself unboxing it or playing it in the app or something, because we're pumped for you too. You deserve it after 36 years. You gotta get a new piece of machinery. Very exciting. We'd love to see you in the group jamming on it. All right, I see more questions. Hey Lily May, hey Sarah Pickles, hey Terry, glad you guys are here. Okay, I see some more comments coming through, but I'm going to come back to the chat in a minute. I think we should dive into this lesson. What do you guys say? So, we're here talking about rhythm today. We've already kind of discussed what rhythm means, right? We've talked a little bit about it adding the momentum and the movement, the motion to the music. Sometimes I will bust out some alliteration on accident. Don't mind me. I throw myself off. The rhythm is kind of this thing that you dance to or along with, where the melody might be what you sing to, and the harmony might be what you play if you're playing, guitar or piano in the background. The rhythm would be drums, or if we're just dancing and listening, the rhythm is what we would dance to. So it's a crucial part of music, right? We can talk about a chord progression or a chord or a note, but it doesn't really mean anything, and it's not really a song that we know until we add the rhythm, and then we're like, ah, that's the song, right? So rhythm is important to talk about. Today in the 101 territory, we're going to be narrowing it down to, of course, something that we can bite off in one lesson, right? There's a lot of area we could travel within this world, but today we're going to keep it to note durations. And by durations, I mean the length of time that you hold a note. So, excuse me, rhythmically speaking, you might think rhythmic playing is lots of different sporadic rhythms. It could be slow or long tones too, especially when we're talking about durations. It can be a very long held note or a short note, okay? So that's what I want to start talking about first. And we have our common notes that many of you have already come in contact with in the 30-day challenge or in the boot camp or in the app in general. But of course, we're going to be talking about the classics like whole notes, half notes, quarter notes. We'll talk about eighth notes, 16th notes. I'll give you a little preview of a 32nd note, but we may leave it there, talking about durations for the day. And then we're going to talk about the relationships between the notes, which is also an important and sometimes overlooked aspect of note durations. Then we're going to talk about how all that stuff relates to time signatures. What are time signatures? Why are they useful? Why do they exist? How can we read them and interpret them? And how do we play in various time signatures? Okay, we're going to talk about that too. We'll start with note duration. So, whole notes. Okay, in a standard 4 count in music, which I'll get into in more detail when we talk about time signatures. In our standard 4 count music where we would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, whole notes get 4 counts. But in the abstract, more broadly, I just want you to think about a whole note as a note that takes up the whole measure in a 4 count music, okay? Because then we're going to talk about the relationships to the other notes. Half notes, 2 count notes, typically. But atypically, when we see it in the non-4 count music, it doesn't get 2 counts anymore. So that's why I'm making that asterisk. The relationships between the notes never change, though. So whole note to half note, I want you to think about that as 2 half notes equal 1 whole note. It's different than saying a half note gets 2 counts and a whole note gets 4 counts, okay? Because even outside of 4 count music, that still remains true. Whole note equals 2 half notes. Now, in standard 4 count music, a quarter note would get 1 count, which means 4 quarter notes could go into 2 half notes or 1 whole note, right? That's the relationship I want us to focus on. So let's put this to the piano. If I were to play a whole note in both hands, it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was 4 measures of whole notes, holding down for 4 counts. Now, if I was going to play whole notes in my left hand and half notes in my right hand, I would play 2 right hand notes for every 1 left hand note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Left hand is holding for all 4 counts. The right hand is holding for 2 counts, picking up, pushing back down for 2 more counts. And I'm counting through in a 4 count, right? Now let's do the same thing. Left hand whole notes, right hand quarter notes, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's go to half notes in the left hand and stay quarter notes in the right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go to quarter notes in both. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The groove is still there, even when I'm switching up my note durations. The even timing is still there, even though I'm switching up my note durations. It's something to practice when you're practicing varying up your note durations in a piece of music. Like not discluding The Entertainer from the 30-day challenge, a kind of difficult rhythmic song. So it's important that when you're practicing this stuff, you practice it with even timing, even if it's slower than you're used to, Peter, right? Or if it's a little faster than you're used to, we can ease our way up and down with tempos, but whatever your comfortable tempo is, it's important that you practice this stuff evenly and you think about the relationships between the notes. Because if all you're doing is counting, it can get kind of difficult when you're playing more syncopated rhythms, right? If I was going to count this out loud, it would be kind of a challenge. We can all feel the even pulse of that when I play it. But if I was going to count out loud every note I was playing, right, it'd be difficult. So that's not really realistic. Instead, I'm more thinking about even timing, and I'm thinking about the relationships between the notes. And a shorthand way to talk about that would be, is the right hand playing by itself? Is the left hand playing by itself? Are they playing together? That's kind of the early stages of your analysis when you're putting this piece, any piece, together. You're not playing it with even timing yet. You're first figuring out the relationships, but then you bring in the timing with the metronome, right? And then that's your next challenge, putting the part you learned with the relationships, now correct, to even timing, okay? Super important. So note durations. We've got whole, half, quarter. Beyond that, we can continue to divide in half, right? So half of a quarter note is an eighth note, 2 eighth notes for a quarter note, 4 eighth notes for a half note, 8 eighth notes for a whole note. And then we can continue to shave. We can go to 16th notes, which is a half of an eighth note, okay? So if we're playing stuff with 16th notes and we're expected to be counting, that's where subdivision can come into play. And I just want to make a brief note about subdivision before I check back in with you guys on the chat, okay? So quarter notes, getting 1 beat each in standard 4-count music, means that any note duration less than a quarter note doesn't even get a full beat. So we have to find a way to count those notes without actually representing them with a number. In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. The little song I made up, I was playing something every beat, but not in between. Now with eighth notes, and then even more so with 16th notes, I would have to play in between the numbers. Here would be something with eighth notes in my right hand, quarter notes in my left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Now, I played it evenly because I'm thinking about the relationships here, right? And I've had some practice. But if you tried to play that and it was new for you, counting like that might be tough, and putting the notes that come in between the counts, putting those notes in there evenly too, can be really challenging. That's where subdivision can come into play. Subdivision is this notion where you can essentially subdivide each beat into even subbeats, right? And then you can account for those subbeats with some sort of a marker. Now, we have our common ways that we can voice these things, and I'll show you right now. If we're counting eighth notes, instead of just saying 1, 2, 3, 4, we want to say something in between the numbers, and typically we say and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It allows you to say something on every, it's not every beat, it'd be every subbeat, but every subbeat that we have in front of us in a given piece of music. So if we don't have eighth notes in the music, we don't need to subdivide like that. If we do, then we do. And if we have 16th notes, then we need to subdivide even more. So think about math for a second here. Does anybody know, anybody remember the lowest common denominator? That's kind of what we need to think about here when we think about this stuff. We have whatever our lowest subdivision of a beat, we need to come down to that and subdivide the whole section to those beats, at least while we're learning it, so we can make sure we're learning it with accurate rhythms and even timing. So with 16th notes, the way we would subdivide would be, we still have our 1 and 2 and, but now we've got notes that fall in between the cracks of the numbers and the ands. So if any of you have seen the rhythm lesson from Harry Connick Jr. in our boot camp, you would know that Harry likes to say this. 1 ta ta ta, 2 ta ta ta, 3 ta ta ta, 4 ta ta ta, 1. Whatever you want to say is okay, as long as you're marking them accurately, and as long as your numbers or your strong beats fall in the right place. If you wanted to, you could say 1 blah blah blah, 2 blah blah blah, 3. I don't actually recommend that, but you get my point. So Harry says one ta te ta. Commonly though, people will also build on the one and they'll say one e and a. And I like that because the e and the now get their own markers, where the ta te ta, they would both be tas, right? So I like this to kind of designate something for every subdivided beat. And so with 16th notes, you've got 4 for every quarter note in the left hand, let's say. So watch this. I'm going to play more. 16s in the right, quarters in the left. I'm going to count out loud. For every number that I say, I'm going to play a new left hand chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in between, I'm going to be saying E and for my right hand 16th notes. If I'm doing it right and the relationships are right, it's all going to match up evenly. Let's try it. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1. I meant to say 4. But that's the challenge, right? So subdividing and marking every beat and subbeat, it can be challenging. But it is a great tool to get you to the point where then you no longer have to count and subdivide. You just know the part, you know the song, and now you can play it right. I was just having a conversation with Chris Vance, our CEO, and it was funny. He was making me laugh because he had a point. He was skeptical. He said, when you're performing, no one's really counting, right? You don't actually count that stuff when you're playing it, Phil. And he has a point. When you're performing something, when you've learned something, no, you're not counting it anymore. But the idea is that you've counted it in the past to help you learn it and to help you now play it without needing to. In other words, if you can play something accurately without counting it, that means you've already done your counting work up front when you learned it, okay? So that's it. That's the main point of the first bit of this lesson that I want to leave you with. Note durations. It's important to memorize what each note gets, but then I would say maybe even more important to really understand all the relationships between them and all the different combinations that you can see within a given measure of music, and then how to subdivide that to learn it and play it accurately. There we go, okay? So I want to just take a brief moment to check in on the chat, and then I'm going to hit you guys with the first pop quiz opportunity of the day, okay? I'm seeing this chat bubbling up, and I like that, so before we get to the pop quiz, I want to just check back in. So where was I? All right, I see some people talking about tempo. And by the way, Andrew is here today moderating, so if you guys have been getting some comments from Playground, that's Andrew going through and trying to answer some of your questions. One thing that's kind of bittersweet as we grow, right, is we're going to get more and more people chatting, and it will be harder for me to make sure I see everybody. So I'm glad to have Andrew here to help. All right, Dave. Dave says, I actually enjoy the rhythm changes in the 30-day challenge. My biggest weakness is having a sense of rhythm. I feel the variations help my development. Dave, that's a great point because to build off of what Peter said, muscle memory is typically often referred to as a good thing. Oh, you got to practice it enough to get it into your muscle memory, right? Now I've got it. But it can also be a crutch in some ways. If you've learned it so well only one way, it can be hard to do it in a different way. So it's actually a great point, Dave, to keep yourself agile at the piano and to be able to play something in different scenarios, like different tempos. It can be very wise to practice it at different tempos throughout your weeks. Even if we're not asking you to in the challenge, you might as well take advantage of the tools in the app and try to kind of soak up a little more out of these exercises. And that could very well be changing the tempos. Okay, so good point. Sarah, I find playing slowly really hard. Sarah, so do I. There's a sweet spot right around a middle comfortable tempo where everyone feels good. And as you go faster, it gets harder. But as you go slower from that comfort zone, it also can get harder. Think about this. If I'm playing a song that, I'm making this up, it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Let's say that was the full tempo of that song. But let's say as I was learning it, I was supposed to play it with a metronome at half that speed. That would sound like this. There's really two, maybe more things, but two things I'll highlight about what I had to do to just play what I played. The first thing is I need to move my hand position up and back down, right? The second thing was I had to play even timing. So at a slower tempo, Sarah and Dave and Peter, good stuff. We have a theme going. In a slower tempo, yes, it's easier for me to move my hand positions up and back down because technically I have more time to do it, right? But as far as even timing goes, I would argue that it's actually harder to do at that speed because of how slow it was. So there's an unexpected challenge that comes with playing slow, and that is try not to speed up. That's tough sometimes, okay? And subdivision, by the way, can be a great tool to help you if you're playing slow tempos. Even if you're only playing quarter notes, you can still subdivide. You can subdivide by 16th notes if you want, because that will help you keep that slow quarter note beat even, okay? Good stuff. Let's keep moving. Chad Miller, slower can be much harder. That's right, man. That's it. I'm glad to see we're all on the same page. Gio Bradley. Hi. Hi, Gio. Peter, slowing down helps me at least to learn counting, which is great. That's it, man. That's it. So slowing down, you can actually grasp the counting at a slower speed. It's like what I was saying earlier. Sometimes you can't even voice the syllables when you're playing something fast. There's not enough time to say it, right? So you just have to kind of mark it in your head. But either way, when we're changing tempos, again, remember the point is to make a different challenge easier when we slow things down, and then we speed it back up to kind of bring you on with what you practiced. And so your point, Peter, slowing down at least helps to learn the counting, and then you can speed back up. That's the idea. You guys are seeing it. Lily May, how we doing? She says, I usually hate having it on slow tempo, but I'm learning River Flows in You advanced hard. Lily May, that's a tough one. And I'm learning to learn it on slow for the first time. No, don't turn that frown emoji upside down, Lily May, because that's actually great news. The fact that you're trying something that's a little maybe out of your range, maybe not, but it's aspirational for you, but you're jumping into it with a slow tempo, that just tells me that you're doing it the right way. So keep going on that track. What a great tune. I'm going to forget how it goes, but it's like... Anyways, sorry, I always want to learn stuff in front of you guys. Awesome to hear, Lily May, that you're doing that. Yeah. Yep, Sarah Pickles talking about the metronome. Again, slow tempo can be hard because, like you said, the sound kind of fades away when there's so much downtime in between the clicks. So here's a tip, actually. If you're practicing something at 40 beats per minute and you want to have a metronome play so that it's happening in between the strong beats as well, you could speed your metronome up to 80 beats per minute and then just know that one beat in your music is actually 2 clicks on the metronome. Or if it's super slow, you could even speed it up 4 times and have 4 clicks for every beat. I have some drummer friends who practice that way for subdividing and for doing cool little rhythmic stuff. That could apply to any instrument, though. All right, one more question, one more thing in the chat, and then I'm going to hit you with a pop quiz for the day. Oh, I see someone say, I think I kind of understand. That's my cue to jump in. And see if I can clarify. So what are we doing here? Yeah, I know Andrew's helping you out. Let's see here. Lily May, I love music, but I hate math. You wouldn't think they were so related, but they are. They can be. Okay, Charles, you count every other 16th note for a 32nd note. That's the best short explanation I know. Yeah, sure, that's another way of saying 2 32nd notes for each 16th note. Correct, so you can keep shaving that down in half. All right. It's all in the math, yep. Yep, that's a good point. Yeah, so you see them grouped or beamed accordingly. Andrew brings up a good point. I should have mentioned this. 8th notes, when you put them together, are beamed by 1 beam across. 16th notes can look similar to 8th notes, except they have 2 beams across the top, right? And then we're going to continue to just multiply as we go. So 30-second notes are going to have, wait, do the 30-second notes have 4 beams or 3 beams? 3 beams, that's what I thought. Too much math. I'm with you, Lily May. But as we go down, so they don't multiply, they just add, the beams add. You see a 3-beam note, that's a 30-second note, okay? All right. How would you voice a 30-second note? Good point, Woodsy Chris. So I'm not certain that anyone, if you're learning something with 30-second notes, I'm not sure if there's a syllable for those, to be honest. I've never had to, there's never been a practical reason for me to put a syllable to every one of the 30-second note divisions. But here's a tip if you do want to say something. You could make up your own, or you could repeat some of the ones that we did in 16. So you could say like 1E and a 1E and a 2E and a 2E and a 3. Something like that. I would encourage you to develop something that works for you. But the fact is, you're not going to really be playing that, voicing all the 30-second notes, unless you're playing it at an incredibly slow speed, which may be the right move. But again, 30-second note syllables, I think practically speaking, we've kind of cut it off as 16ths. But dig in, subdivide each beat. 30-second notes, you've got 8 per beat. Okay, so do some math there, and you can assign some syllables as you like. Okay, guys, pop to the quiz time. Let's get a pop quiz going. We talked about note durations. I need everybody to get their fingers ready at the keyboards, your computer keyboards, that is, not your musical keyboards. But first pop quiz is going to have to do with note durations, and I'm looking for my first correct answer. So here's how this works for those who haven't done this in the past. I'm going to ask a question, and I'll do a fake one here just a sec to do a demo. I'll ask a question like, how many counts do you hold a whole note for? And then the first person who writes 4, that's the correct answer, is going to win 1 free song credit in the Playground Sessions interactive app. Okay? Now sometimes I'll say the second correct answer or the 5th correct answer, because I don't always want the fastest fingers to win. Andrew is going to be selecting the comments from my criteria, okay? And then he'll reach out and say, congrats, you won. Whoever wins, Andrew will tell you this too in the chat, but you'll just email support at Playground Sessions and you'll say, I won the pop quiz in the live lesson, okay? That's how this works. We had a handful of winners last week, handful before, so we're going to do it again. So here we go. First official question. I'm looking for the first right answer. Ready? How many quarter notes can fit into the space of a half note? Go! First correct answer. How many quarter notes fit into the space of a half note? Can't get me on copyright if I'm not playing it right. Okay, I think we're starting to see some answers pull in. I like to play a bit just because there's a little bit of a delay, and that lets me see when the chats come through. Oh, I love seeing a lot of answers coming through, and I love seeing a lot of correct answers. Oh, here we go. So the correct answer, first of all, now that many of you have written in, how many quarter notes go into the space of a half note? The correct answer is 2. Okay? Remember, we've got a whole note. A whole note is related to 2 half notes. Same space. That's the relationship there. Another way to say that would be 2 half notes fit into 1 whole note. And then we have quarter notes. So there's 4 quarter notes in a whole note, and I saw a lot of you put 4. I understand where you were coming from. There's 4 quarter notes in a whole note, but I tried to throw you off a little bit. My question was, how many quarter notes go into a half note? And the correct answer was 2. Judges, who's our winner? Dave Kolaz? Dave, my friend. Dave, you're our first winner of the day. Congratulations. You get a free song credit for the Playground Sessions app that you can use on any song you like. I think nowadays those are going for $2 or so. So it's like, there you go. A free song credit for you, my friend. Andrew will write in a comment in just a minute the email address that you're supposed to send your email to get your free song credit. And we're keeping a list of the winners too here, so no worries there. So Dave, congratulations, first winner. All right, second question. Another pop quiz opportunity, another free song credit opportunity for a durations question. This one's going to get a little bit harder, okay? We ready? This time I'm looking for the third correct answer. Third correct answer. What is the name of the single note that has the equivalent duration of 4 eighth notes? I'm looking for the fifth correct answer. What is one single note? What is that note called? Is it a whole note, half note, quarter note? What is the note called that is equal to 4 eighth notes? This is a trickier one. I'm going to play while you guys think about this one. 4 eighth notes. What is that one note called? Fifth? The fifth correct answer? All right. Okay, everyone. I see a lot of people writing. That's great to see. Okay, so the correct answer here, let's think about this. Remember, eighth notes were half of a quarter note, right? So we can fit 2 eighth notes in a quarter note. My question was, what's the note that has the equivalent of 4 eighth notes? Well, that would be 2 quarter notes, right? And we know that is a half note. So for everyone that said a half note, congratulations. I see Barney Powers. Barney, what's up? Great to see you, Barn. Hey, we got to hang soon. Barney's an old friend. I'm glad to see you here hanging with us. And you were correct. But Barney, you were too fast. We were looking for the fifth correct answer. Dave, you got it too. James, you got it too. Lynn, you got it too. Andrew, keep me honest. Who was our official fifth correct answer?
Lily Mae.
Lily Mae! Second week in a row. You're on fire, Lily Mae. Congratulations, you won again. So you know the drill by now. You can redeem your free song credit from support. Let's keep things moving, guys. I want to move on to talk about time signatures because we have still a good amount to get through today, and we're past the 30-minute mark. Okay, so let's talk time signatures real quick. I could go in depth and break it all down from you from day one, and we will talk about that in this lesson, but I'll tell you what, I need to get some water, and I have someone in mind who already has taught about time signatures in a way that I couldn't beat, right? You guys may know David Sides. Well, one of the new lessons that we did with David for the boot camp, he tackles this notion of time signatures. And I think David does a great job. There's also graphics and things that help explain. So what I'd like to do now is send you to the lesson in our boot camp. For those who aren't app users yet, this is an exclusive preview because this is part of our boot camp lesson on time signatures. I'll see you on the other end and we'll break down what David has taught us.
A typical song is filled with hundreds of notes. I must have played at least 50 there. And when notes interact with one another, they create specific sounds and even different styles of music. Because there are so many different notes in music and so many different rhythms, it's important that we have a way to organize them all. This is where time signatures come into play. A time signature is a musical element that's used to organize all of the notes into small groups, and it tells you which note gets the beat. Now, depending on how these notes are organized or grouped together will determine the feel and the sound of the music. Let's take a look at how time signatures work. A time signature is a fraction that's placed at the beginning of a staff with a number on top and a number on the bottom. Each of these numbers has a specific function. One of the most popular time signatures in music is 4/4, so we'll use that time signature as an example to begin understanding how time signatures work. The bottom number in the time signature is the note that gets the beat. When you see a 4 on the bottom, that tells you that the quarter note gets the beat. How do we know it's a quarter note? Well, remember, a time signature is a fraction, and if you put a 1 on top of the fraction, you now have 1 over 4, or 1/4, thus representing a quarter note. So again, when you see a 4 in the denominator of the fraction, you know that the quarter note gets the beat. Let's look at another example of a time signature where instead of a 4, you have a 2 in the denominator. When you have a 2 on the bottom of the fraction, the half note gets the beat. What about when you have an 8 on the bottom of the time signature? You guessed it, the 8th note gets the beat. So what do we mean when we say that a note gets the beat? In general, a beat in music is the pulse of the music. And the pulse is what you feel, is what you stomp your feet to, is what you bop your head to. And most music has an underlying and steady pulse to it. Now, although you can feel the pulse in the music or the beat, you cannot say which note gets the beat without a time signature. Okay, so we know that the denominator in the time signature tells us which note gets the beat. So what does the top number indicate? The top number in the time signature tells us how many beats are grouped together in measures. Let's take a look. Taking a look again at a 4/4 time signature, the bottom number tells us that a quarter note gets the beat. The top number tells us that we're going to group the equivalent of 4 quarter notes together in a measure. A measure is the space between 2 vertical lines called bar lines that organizes these groupings of beats. Let's look at another example, 3/4. In this time signature, again, the quarter note gets the beat because there's a 4 in the denominator. But the top number tells us that we're going to group the equivalent of 3 quarter notes in a measure. Now the time signatures we just looked at had a 4 in the denominator, making the quarter note the beat. Now let's look at some examples with a 2 in the denominator. Now remember, when a 2 is in the denominator, a half note gets the beat. Let's take 2/2 for example. With this time signature, a half note gets the beat, and there is the equivalent of 2 half notes in each measure. When looking at a time signature of 3/2, that means the half note gets the beat, and each measure has the equivalent of 3 half notes. Now that you have a basic understanding of how time signatures work, it's a great time to practice playing music with different time signatures. Go ahead and give it a shot.
All right, I like that salute from David. There's David Sides, everybody. We love hearing from David as a teacher, as a player on his YouTube channel, and in support, and everywhere else. David's a busy guy in the company here, so we're always happy when we can get him on camera. That's a bit about time signatures. I saw the chat kind of moving during the lesson, and some people had some questions about time signatures. So what I want to do is kind of follow up on what David was talking about as it relates to some of the questions I saw. And then I'm just going to go to the chat excuse me, I misspoke. First, we're going to pop quiz it on time signatures. But I want to make sure that I'm answering these questions as well, okay? So just to recap, we know there's a numerator and a denominator, okay? You've seen this stuff before, whether you know it or not. It's in the 30-day challenge. It's in all of our rookie song lessons, and even the rookie boot camp stuff. There's a time signature in there. The numerator tells us how many beats are in a measure, and the denominator tells us what note gets the beat. So in the beginning of today's live lesson, I mentioned something about how a whole note gets 4 counts in standard 4-count music, right? Well, now that we're getting into time signatures, I can elaborate on that a little bit. When you're starting out, typically you only see time signatures with a 4 on the bottom, also maybe on the top, right? It's 4/4 is called common time for a reason. 4 on top, 4 on bottom, 4 beats per measure. That's what the top number tells us, how many beats per measure. And it doesn't mean 4, the 4 on the bottom means quarter note equals a beat. Okay, we've already established that with David. Common time, because that's commonly what we'll see as beginners. But that does not mean that we won't see other stuff, right? And that's why I made that asterisk about whole note doesn't always equal 4. Okay, so just a little bit of an explainer there. But that's the gist of the time signature. That's the main takeaway. How many beats per measure? You might see 4, you might see 3, you might see 2. As Lynn Cartan, as Lynn Carton writes, Lynn says, what about 5/4? 5 on top. I'll get to that in a second. You can see any number up top. I was talking with Andrew earlier today. He's working on a project for a big band covering some Mahavishnu Orchestra stuff. If you don't know their stuff, they write stuff in crazy time signatures, like 13/8 and like 9/11, whatever. You could kind of make up whatever. And we're not going to get into that in the 101 territory, of course. But to answer your question, you can see 5 on top. You can see other stuff. No matter what that number on top is, that's what you're going to count to for each measure. If you see an 11 on top, here's what you're going to be playing. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't see that. That's not common time. That's an uncommon time. But whatever that numerator is, that's what you're counting to. The bottom number gets a little weirder, right? Because it's almost like a symbol. The 4 is a symbol for quarter note getting the beat. A 2 is a symbol for half note getting the beat. That's where things can get tricky. So I want to go to the questions here and just see if I can answer something directly. So Peter says, I don't really get what the beat means. As an example, 4/4 and 8/8 is mathematically the same, but the beat is different. But what does that really mean? Great question. I'm going to come back to it. I just want to read a few more. Lynn says, what does it mean when the upper part of the time signature is larger? I presume you mean larger than the denominator. For example, 5/4, another great question. Okay, let's talk about those two. I'll answer Lynn's first. In math, that changes things, right? Straight up math, you have a fraction like 3/4, 3/4. A 5/4 changes things, right? Because it just does. But in music, it doesn't quite work the same way. So you can have something in 12/4. You can have something in 10/4, whatever. What would that mean? Well, it would mean the top number is how many beats you're counting in the measure, and the 4 on the bottom would mean that you're counting quarter notes as one beat. So 5/4 just sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And everything I'm counting there, every beat I'm counting is a quarter note. And so this leads me then to Peter's question, which is more about the denominator and what it means when we say what note gets the beat, right? It really is more of a conceptual thing. It matters more when you're looking at a page, okay, of notes, and you're figuring out how to learn it or how to teach it. It's a communication tool so that people can learn music and compose and teach music, right? So if I'm writing something and I have to choose the time signature, I would argue that it's much more important, much more impactful on the music to choose the numerator than it is to choose the denominator. In other words, if I say I'm going to write something in 4 or write something in 3, I'm talking about the numerator. I'm going to write something in groups of 4 beats. I'm going to count to 4 every measure in this song. Or I'm going to write something that's in groups of 3 beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Much different than something in 4. Okay, now the denominator matters less, especially if I'm just playing something and asking you to nod your head along with it or count along with it. But when you're looking at the page, you're learning something new in the app, for example, it does matter. So let me answer your question specifically, Peter. 4/4 and 8/8. So again, if you're strictly in math class here, you're right. Those would both equal 1, right? 4/4, 8/8. And so to that point, this can be confusing. But I don't want you guys to think about this as a straight-up fraction in that way. Instead, to point out the differences in your example, Peter, in a song in 4/4, you would say that this song, we're going to count to 4 in every measure, and the quarter note gets 1 beat. So you would say there might be 4 quarter notes in a measure, or there might be 2 half notes in a measure, or a whole note, or 8/8 notes. But either way, a quarter note value is equivalent to 1 beat in that song. And you're going to count to 4 in each measure. 8/8, which I'll be honest, is not a time signature maybe I've ever seen, but if we did, theoretically it could exist, we would count to 8 in every measure, and an 8th note would get 1 beat. So technically it would be wrong to count a song in 8/8 like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Because we're not representing beats 5, 6, 7, or 8 in our counts. In 8/8 music, the numerator would tell us that there are 8 counts in each measure. You have to count to 8. And every 8th note that you see is the equivalent of 1 beat. Excuse me. And if that were the case, if we saw a half note in 8/8, and I asked you how many beats does this get, the correct answer would not be 2. It would be 4. That's the difference. But we're talking about this kind of heady, intellectual side of this stuff, which is kind of what this theory month has been about in a way. So I'm not saying we're doing the wrong thing. But when it comes to time signatures, I don't want it to get in the way of you playing a song, okay? The time signature is there to help you learn the song and play it accurately. But I don't want us to get caught up about some of this sort of headier stuff about the denominators. What's important is that you know what you're counting in each measure. And that's something that will come up throughout your whole practice of that song, even if it takes you months. You'll still be referring to that. Oh, I'm in 3, I got to count to 3. Or, oh, I'm in 4, I got to count to 4. The denominator is likely just going to play a very temporary role in your learning of a song. You'll likely look at it in the beginning when you first open it up. Ah, there's a 4 on the bottom. I don't know why I'm holding a newspaper like an old man. There's a 4 on the bottom in this music, so I know that the quarter note gets a beat. Cool. And then you kind of are done with that. Now you just got to remember, if it's in 4/4, to count to 4 in each measure. If it's a half note in the denominator, like many of you see in the 30-day challenge or in a lot of our rookie level arrangements where we actually write in 4/2, there's a half note on the bottom. That tells you that a half note gets 1 beat. And there can be how many half notes in the measure? Well, it depends on what the numerator is. All right, so I hope that shines some more light on that. But let me go back to the chat here and just make sure we're feeling good, and then I'm going to give you guys 2 more pop quiz opportunities as it relates to time signatures, okay? All right, so here we go. Philly cheesesteak. Man, every time I see your name, I get hungry. I should probably eat dinner before these. But Philly cheesesteak says correct. Oh, yeah, so you're talking, I think you're referring to Gail, 5 beats per measure, quarter note gets the beat. That's the simple way of saying that's what 5/4 is. Correct. Thanks, Philly. People used to call me that in high school, by the way, because my name's Phil. Stu is answering as well. Thanks, everyone, for jumping in. Stu, I was playing a bit of that. I was jamming on take 5. That's funny you said that. Sorry, I'm doing it again. Great song. One of the classic examples of a 5/4 time signature. Or maybe it's not even 4 on the bottom. That's what I'm talking about. All we know is it's in 5. No, I'm kidding. It's 5/4. But it would be hard to know if you listened only. Could be 5/2, could be 5/8. All right. How else are we doing? Okay, Chad, why don't we try something a little easier like polyrhythm? Sure, Chad. All right. I'm going to play triplets in my left hand, and we'll do... No, well, that'll be for 201. But good call. Polyrhythm's fun, too. Okay, or 401. Yeah, good point. Okay, pop quiz time, everyone. I think we've talked enough about time signatures. Here is our first question. I need the first correct answer, so I need everybody to get warmed up here, okay? Now, to be clear, I'm looking for an answer of a number. You can spell the number out or you can write the number, okay? So for example, if the correct answer to my question was 2, you could write the number 2, or you could write TWO, right? I guess we would accept TO or TOO because this is not a grammar lesson, this is more of a math lesson. Just kidding, you gotta spell the numbers right. Okay, pop quiz. First correct answer, you ready? How many beats do I count per measure in a time signature of 6/8? I know that's not one we covered yet, but you guys have the tools you need to answer this question. I need the first correct answer. How many beats per measure if our time signature is 6/8? Yeah, but technically I think it still is. First correct answer. So, guys, Andrew brought up a good point. There's a more advanced way we can be thinking about that time signature. So sorry if I threw anyone off. But still, the way we've talked about it today, there's only one correct answer. And I'll break it down. We talked about the numerator equals how many beats per measure. Denominator equals what note gets the beat. So I didn't ask you what note gets the beat, because we didn't really talk about that. When an 8 is on the bottom, an eighth note gets the beat. Oh, we did talk about that. We talked about the 8-8 example. So 6-8, simply put, from today's perspective, would mean 6 beats per measure. Now, Andrew brought up, you could think about it as 2, because it's a compound meter. And sometimes I've actually said that you can feel 6, 8 in 2, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But again, we didn't talk about that today. So the correct answer is 6. Who was the first person that wrote 6? Andrew, drum roll, please. Dave? Did Dave already win one today?
Yeah. Mark.
Dave.
Want to do Mark?
Yeah, Dave, I'll tell you what, man. Because you already won one today, we're going to give it to the runner-up. And that's Mark Weiss. Mark, you did it. Dave, sorry. I'm glad you still gave it a shot. And you were right. You were fast. Last week, Lily May, I think, won a third one in a row, so we gave her 2. So that can be the new rule. If you win 3 of them, you can get that second one. But for now, let's give it runner-up. Mark Weiss, that's you, my friend. You win. Free song credit. Okay, we're going to wrap things up today with one final pop quiz. And we're going to make things a little harder this time in the spirit of this being math, okay? Let's see if I can come up with a good one here. All right, this one's going to require some thinking. I want the first correct answer here. First correct answer. I just wrote a very short song. It's 2 measures long. Okay? The time signature is 3/4. How many eighth notes could I fit into my song? Go. First correct answer. It's a 2-measure song. There's only 2 measures. My time signature is 3/4. How many eighth notes can I fit into my whole song? This is a multi-step question here. Let's see if we can get this. First answer. First correct answer. All right, let's see if I can even figure out this answer. Here's how we're going to solve this question for those who are stumped on this. 2 measures. Time signature is 3/4. That means 3 beats per measure. That's the top number. The denominator tells us the quarter note gets 1 beat. So here in my song of 2 measures, we're counting 3 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets a beat. How many quarter notes could we have in my song? 3 in this measure, 3 in this measure. Therefore, how many eighth notes could we have in my song? We're going to double those. 6 and 6. Is that right? Why does that sound wrong when I say it out loud? Yeah, okay, cool. Cool. It's too much math. Yeah, so 3/4, 2 measures, you can fit, I already lost it again. You can fit 12 eighth notes. Do we have some correct answers?
Yes, we do.
Lynn, was it Lynn?
Yep.
Wow, that was a tough one, and you got it super fast. Great job, Lynn. You won. I'll shout out as well. Lily May got it as well. Great job. Dave again. Rumu, 31. I haven't seen your name before. Thanks for participating. That's awesome. Barney, you got it. James, you got it. Gail. Awesome work, you guys. That was a fun one, right? And you guys are really grasping this if you answered that last question right. If you didn't answer that last question right, I want you to go back and just dig in a little bit deeper into this lesson. Yes, it's a live lesson, but when we're done here, if you didn't know, these live lessons stay up on the channel. And also, don't forget that I pulled in the David Sides boot camp lesson on time signatures. We have a whole bunch more in our boot camp for those of you who aren't yet app members. You got to check out the boot camp as well. There's a ton more about rhythm, time signatures, and beyond. If you don't know, there's a free trial kind of always offering to you guys on YouTube. 30 days, you can try the app for free with no strings attached. We're doing our 30-day challenge right now. That's in the app as well. So if you're not an app member yet, you guys are really missing out. There's a link, I believe, that we can post in the comments here to the free trial for YouTube. And if it's not going to be in the comments now, then we'll put it in the description of this video. Okay, Andrew's going to give it to you guys. So click on that link and you can go through the form, sign up for your free trial. 30 days, and you can cancel anytime without payment. So definitely worth checking out. Thanks for watching, guys. We got one more lesson in our theory month. And then it's time for a new month. So next week, in addition to our last theory lesson for the month, I'm also going to be sending out a poll of some sort. We'll figure it out, but I want to get your guys' feedback again on what topic we should cover in February. So we did Theory 101 in January. We're still doing it. What do we want to do in February? Think about it. And I'll think about it too. Next week, we'll make a decision as a group, okay? We'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This has been a blast. I'm Phil, and I'll see some of you tomorrow for day 9 of our 30-day challenge. I'll see the rest of you next week. Again, Wednesday, 1 week from today, 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on YouTube. See you guys. And this is called an augmented triad. So we got major. For dominant 7 chords, we have a major triad with a flat 7. It's very similar to what Harry showed, but it has a bit more of a bluesy feel. So